the coast of Florida, January 2015. The crew of a Navy F-18 fighter jet fly into restricted airspace and encounter an airborne object directly in their flight path. They aim their forward-looking infrared camera at the object and capture it in flight.
F-18s were chasing this thing, and they couldn't catch it. The UAP is doing things that modern aerodynamic vehicles can't do.
The pilots in pursuit of the unidentified craft observed that it performed unusual maneuvers unlike any military aircraft they had ever witnessed, and all while flying at high velocities.
One of the impressive aspects of it is that it's moving against the wind, and you can hear the pilots say this.
Look at that thing, dude. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots to the west.
It doesn't lose speed, and it rotates mechanically against the wind. This gimbal footage is one of the rare pieces of physical evidence that is corroborated directly by individuals who are out there on the East Coast documenting these things. It is highly impressive.
Now, modern-day aircraft can yaw and pitch, and they can roll, but they can't simply pitch straight up and continue to move forward into the line of flight. This thing does that. It's moving extremely fast, and it's accelerating much faster than the F-18s can. So that in itself is a feat that mankind has yet to accomplish.
We tried to vet this for a long time. What's uncomfortable is that we haven't figured it out, that we don't know whose technology this is. If you can't identify someone that's far more advanced than you technologically, Houston, we have a problem.
Navy video of the incredible encounter was made public in December 2017, and the object was dubbed Gimbal due to its ability to rotate on an axis. But for ancient astronaut theorists, just as intriguing as the way it moves is the object's shape.
The craft itself is an acorn-shaped craft. Immediately, that's reminiscent of what the ancient Indian text described as the Vimana, which were acorn-shaped craft.
In the Mahabharata and in many of the ancient Vedic texts, they speak about the so-called Vimanas. The Vimanas were flying vehicles with which to reach the celestial realm.
In the ancient Sanskrit epics of India, there are highly detailed descriptions of the Vimana, which carried the gods and other important figures through the sky, and sometimes to other planets. The acorn-shaped craft were even incorporated at the very top of many Hindu temples. And some researchers believe they also inspired similar Buddhist structures called stupa.
If we go to Indonesia and look at Borobudur, where we have 194 stupas sitting in concentric circles, each stupa, in my opinion, represents a type of flying craft, because stupa actually means celestial chariot, or a way with which to reach the celestial realm. And they are in the shape of the so-called Vimanas.
Often the Vimana were described as war machines, armed with incredible weapons.
There are tales of flying craft that could defy gravity and fly at extraordinary speeds that defy the laws of physics. These were military in usage, had powerful engines and powerful weapons. In these battles, missiles would fire that could wipe out cities. These were the earliest stories we have of flying military craft.
In the Indian text, the Vimanas are the chariots or craft of the gods. They were clearly a method of transportation that could take the gods from place to place, country to country, and even to other planets. They're sometimes described as bright clouds. Some of them are 7 stories tall.
In 1895, Sanskrit scholar Shivkar Talpada decided to fashion an aircraft based solely on information gleaned from the ancient Indian writings about the Vimana. While the story is hotly disputed, he allegedly tested the craft in front of an audience of thousands of people on a beach in Bombay.
The legend has it that he flew for like 30 seconds at 1,500 feet. The Wright brothers only went 120 feet for 12 seconds. But even more exciting is that this is technology based on a scripture written thousands of years before mankind ever had the idea of heavier than air flight. How is this possible?
According to the Hindu text, the crafts were mind-controlled, able to change direction and pitch and travel at high speeds, defying our current knowledge of aeronautical physics.
What's really cool is that these modern-day UFO videos show that these vehicles are capable of ridiculous maneuvers, that they can accelerate at the drop of a dime, or they can just stop or change direction immediately at G-forces that we could not survive. In the Vimanika Shastra, which describes what these Vimanas were capable of doing, the exact same descriptions exist. The fact that we have similar stories in ancient times illustrates to me something similar has happened.
Could it be that the ancient Sanskrit texts are describing extraterrestrial vehicles even more advanced than the US military's most sophisticated fighter jets? And if so, are we seeing the same alien technology on display in the recent videos released by the United States Navy? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes. July 29th, 1958. Responding to the successful launch of the Soviet space satellite Sputnik, President Dwight Eisenhower signs the National Aeronautics and Space Act, officially establishing NASA.
NASA was formed in 1958, partly out of a previously existing government agency called NACA that just dealt with aeronautics, and then with the early space program that was being developed by the Army and the Air Force.
NASA was established to take the United States into space and to be a contender in the new direction that humanity was moving, of exploring space and out into our solar system.
The President and Congress established NASA as part of the Department of Defense. The official reason was to prevent the Soviets from stealing US technology. But some believe the real motive for this classification was not to hide information from the Soviets, but to hide it from the American public.
A lot of people have the idea that NASA is a civilian science agency, and it's not. It says right there in the act of Congress that created it, anything that they discover is subject to classification and being kept secret and being kept from the American people. The Brookings Report, which was commissioned by NASA right after NASA itself was created, essentially was commissioned for the purpose of deciding what NASA should do if in fact they made some sort of extraterrestrial contact. If they either found artifacts on the moon or on Mars, or if they had direct contact with a superior intelligence, what they should do. And the Brookings Report says very specifically, number one, don't tell anybody. If you tell anybody, it will shatter the fabric of our civilization. It will destroy us.
Some researchers believe the evidence of NASA's hidden agenda can be found in the close ties between its founding scientists and secret societies.
These secret societies had at their core essentially a belief that they were directly descended from these great gods of ancient Egypt, Isis, Osiris, and Horus. And they considered these gods to be truly the source of their bloodline, but also that these gods themselves came from space. At the very top, you had the Freemasons. You had James Webb, who was a director of NASA. You had a man named Kenneth Kleinknecht, who was the head of the Mercury program, the Apollo program, the Gemini program. He was a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Freemason. Below them, you had the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, or followers of Aleister Crowley. People like Jack Parsons out at JPL were all put together, and so they all ended up under the very same roof with the very same agenda and the very same belief system.
We see this practice of passing knowledge down through a secret society go back all the way to the days of the Illuminati, who believed that a select few of the elite were smart enough, were capable of handling this secret knowledge, but not the population at large. So the question remains, has this knowledge been passed down through secret societies for generations? And this may predate the secret societies that we know about in modern times all the way back to the days of the pharaohs.
Like the ancient Egyptians, could NASA's founding fathers have shared the belief that humans descended from extraterrestrial beings? What did the members of these secret societies know about space travel? And how did the ancient past influence their work? Those who suspect these NASA officials operated a hidden agenda point to the repeated use of the number 33, an extremely important symbolic figure in secret societies.
If you look at the very first landing strip at Cape Canaveral, where we would be landing aircraft and eventually bringing the space shuttle back, it was runway 33. If you look at the launch pad at White Sands, New Mexico, the only launch pad is launch pad number 33. So it seems to permeate throughout NASA, this number 33 over and over again. And the fact that it's connected to Freemasonry makes you kind of wonder if maybe there was some other deeper symbolism working.
Burbank, California, December 1984. Movie producer and UFO researcher Jamie Chandere arrives home to find a manila envelope has been dropped through the mail slot of his front door. The postmark indicates that it was sent from Albuquerque, New Mexico, but no return address is written on the envelope. When he opens it, he finds only a roll of 35mm film.
And what he had received was this package right here. This is the original package. And inside the package, there was the roll of film inside this canister. And this is actually the roll of film that he received. And this film, when copied properly, produced these 8 pages of the Eisenhower briefing document.
The Eisenhower briefing document is a memo that was allegedly written in 1952 by the first director of the CIA, Roscoe Hillenkoetter, to President-elect Dwight Eisenhower. In it, Hillenkoetter writes that sitting President Harry Truman has formed a secret group within the U.S. government called the Majestic 12 to examine crashed extraterrestrial spacecraft.
The document that he received basically reported that we had had previous crashes, including the one at Roswell. The bottom line recommendation to President Eisenhower was that this topic continued to be kept secret.
Aerospace engineer Dr. Robert Wood was one of the men Chandere asked to examine this memo. His 43-year career included work on aerodynamic heating, ballistic missile defense, radar, and the space station. It is his opinion that this document is the smoking gun to prove that the most famous alleged UFO crash of all time, the Roswell incident, really was an extraterrestrial event.
For several years, I was looking at the authenticity of this memo and trying to relate to other sources. In terms of the main ideas and the statements of fact in the memo being correct, I'm confident that they are.
The Roswell incident that is detailed in the Eisenhower briefing document occurred in 1947 during Truman's first term in office, when Eisenhower was Chief of Staff of the Army. On July 7th, an unidentified object crashed on a ranch just outside the town of Roswell, New Mexico. The next day, the local newspaper announced that officials from the Army airfield had reported the capture of a, quote, flying saucer. But just a few hours later, the military revised that statement to say the object was nothing more than a weather balloon. Since that time, further details have emerged from alleged insiders that not only one craft, but 3, and even alien bodies were retrieved that night.
Harry Truman is President of the United States. Dwight D. Eisenhower, General Nathan Twining, these people would be the very first that would get these calls. And there was some sort of a communication glitch. That's how that headline made it out. That one headline was telling the truth, but this government did not want information about non-humans out to what their perceived enemies were. And Harry S. Truman, a practical man in every way, looking at this whole situation, he must have said, I need help I can trust.
If you were President Truman in 1947 and you were presented with credible evidence that there was an alien presence on planet Earth, what would you do? You would create a commission to study what is going on and make recommendations and explore the subject. What did President Harry Truman do? He created Majestic 12. He created the National Security Act, he created the National Security Council, and he created the CIA, all at the same time in response to this threat.
The US government decided it needed to have a main central oversight committee that would handle the so-called alien problem. The mission of MJ-12 was to decide on what the United States government policy should be towards aliens and extraterrestrials, what it should be towards releasing the information or keeping it secret, and they were empowered to ultimately decide everything regarding the presence of aliens on the planet Earth.
President Eisenhower's great-granddaughter, Laura Eisenhower, claims that the Majestic 12 was a real organization and that her great-grandfather had no choice but to continue what his predecessor, Harry Truman, had started.
President Eisenhower was definitely in a very challenged position as far as how to handle the exopolitical issues going on. He was actually the scapegoat or somebody everybody could later blame for some of the things that are happening. That is actually MJ-12. This is the hidden shadow government. He wasn't able to do anything about it. But the ones that were close to him knew that he was going to put out this information for the public, and it got shut down. They even had a planned date and nothing ended up happening.
March 1994. Almost a decade after Jamie Chandere received the Eisenhower briefing document, Majestic 12 researchers are shocked when a second roll of film surfaces. This time, it is sent anonymously to a UFO group in Maryland from Quillen's drugstore in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Investigative journalist Linda Moulton Howe was among the first to examine these documents, and she has been conducting research on MJ-12 for more than 2 decades. In April 2017, editor and researcher Giorgio Tsoukalos traveled to Albuquerque, New Mexico to meet with Linda and find out what she knows about these mysterious documents.
So if I understand this correctly, the first documentation of the MJ-12 files came in the form of 35mm negatives that somebody at some point took photos of a document that existed in paper form. Do we know who did this? Who took those photographs?
Throughout my experience as a reporter, there are people who have served in the military or CIA, DIA, NSA, NRO, and they are out there and they have grudges. They are angry. They feel that this story should come out or that they have been infringed against. And in this case, this might have been somebody who had this manual in their work, photographed it maybe right there at the pharmacy, and the rest is history. Of all the documents that I've ever seen and studied, it is this restricted Psalm 101, Majestic 12 Group Special Operations Manual that I think is really confirmation. It goes beyond disclosure because this is April 1954, Majestic 12 Group. It's the War Office stamp. It is real. And the title, Extraterrestrial Entities and Technology Recovery and Disposal, Top Secret, Magic Eyes Only. And in here, magic is defined as the highest national security clearance in the United States.
This is sensational.